we will now call upon our last but not the least guest, the leader of the NDP, Mr. Jagmeet Singh, to address the Assembly for a total of 20 minutes. So he will give his speech, and then I will take question. Is Jagmeet Singh, you are more than welcome to join me on the stage. So total 20 minutes. Yeah, thank you. So I will manage the questions for two questions for a total of 4 questions total. So thank you. To you.
Thank you, merci. Thank you. How are you doing? National Chief. Greetings. It's an honor to be here. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories that we're gathered on, the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And as always, whenever we acknowledge the traditional territories, as a settler, for me, it's particularly important to remember the injustice that the First People of this land have suffered and continue to suffer, and our responsibility as settlers to work towards justice for the First People of this land. I want to just acknowledge the elders, the youth, the chiefs, the councillors, all the leaders, all the staff, all the members and all the community members that make this event possible, and thank you for the honor of being here. And I share greetings today on behalf of all New Democrats. C'est vraiment un honneur d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. Je suis reconnaissant comment c'est vraiment spécial d'avoir cette opportunité. So I want to start off by acknowledging some of the work of my team. Often the leader gets a lot of recognition, but I'm only here because of an incredible team that I work with, staff, but also incredible MPs. And so I just want to acknowledge our critic for Indigenous Services is Laurie Idlout, who is the MP for Nunavut. She's an Inuit woman, a lawyer, and a very powerful voice who has really made a big contribution to our movement. I want to acknowledge Blake Desjardins, a Métis with Cree heritage as well, who is the first two-speared MP in Parliament. And as a young man with incredible experience and wisdom, he has been a very significant force in our party. Charlie Angus, as some of you know, has been really tireless in working for justice for Indigenous children, and was one of the really vocal fighters in challenging this government that was taking Indigenous kids to court. And I want to take a moment to reflect on all the Indigenous activists and AFN's leadership, Cindy Blackstock, and so many others who were able to stop this government from fighting kids in court and to finally reach an agreement. So that was really, really important. I'll be talking a bit about our agreement later on, but I want you to know that we made it a condition that we would not even enter into discussions on an agreement until this legal battle against Indigenous kids was dropped. It was one of our prerequisites. So we are honored to be a part, just one small part, of all the people that fought to get this agreement. And now we have to make sure that the government actually follows through with the agreement, which is often a very important part of any sort of resolution. We've got to make sure the follow-through is there. I want to just also acknowledge Charlie, Mumalak, and Nikki's work, all members of our team, on getting raising awareness about the idea of a special prosecutor on so-called residential schools, which National Chief has referred to as institutions of genocide. But these are crimes that were committed. And for crimes that are committed, there needs to be justice, and that means those that committed those crimes need to be prosecuted, brought to account, and something we absolutely believe. And I want to just wrap up with our team with Leah Gazan. She's been a very powerful voice on raising awareness around the lack of action on the missing, murdered Indigenous women and girls in Two-Spirit, and how those really vital calls for justice need to be implemented. She is actually responsible for a study at the status of women that links the connection between work camps and violence against Indigenous women and girls. And she has highlighted how the Liberal government has not spent any of the money allocated on actually building or solving this serious crisis, none of the money committed has actually been spent, and she uncovered that. And then finally, not currently a part of our team, but always a part of our legacy, Romeo Saginash and his leadership in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and him being a force behind it eventually becoming law in Canada, and our commitment to making sure that that declaration is actually implemented in the spirit of shared prosperity, that we shouldn't have to worry about a budget line item funding for Indigenous communities. But if we actually follow the declaration, there should be shared economic prosperity, that Indigenous communities benefit from the development that happens on their lands, on your lands. And I think that is a model where we can actually see real sovereignty, real sustainability, and an economic model which is based on that shared prosperity. It's better for everyone if we work in partnership, in respect, nation to nation, where projects are developed in the spirit of working with Indigenous communities as the sovereign owners, and making sure they actually move ahead in respect of the land, water, and air, so that it is good for generations to come. I want to talk to you a bit about the deal, the agreement in Parliament. We looked at this Parliament that Canadians had chosen 2 times in a row a minority government, and we wanted to make sure that we did everything we could to get people help. So we used our power in this minority government to deliver some meaningful victories for people. And I want to touch on what people expected of us. They wanted leaders to show up. They wanted leaders to get to work. They wanted leaders to work together. And instead of worried about fighting each other, do something that actually helps people out. So we listened to people, we listened to Canadians, we listened to Indigenous communities, and in the agreement we secured a number of victories. I just want to highlight some of the focus that we put on specifically key pieces in the agreement for Indigenous communities. One of the biggest concerns I hear from people is about housing. There is a serious crisis in housing across the country, but specifically impacting Indigenous communities. So in the agreement, we have forced the government with our power to build a for Indigenous, by Indigenous housing plan. There's been $2 billion allocated for this program. That is a start, but we need a lot more. But this is a plan that's going to be designed for and by Indigenous people. And that's something really unique. We've seen a lot of announcements of funding that no one can ever access. This announcement that here's funding available, but no one knows how to use it, no one knows how to access it, and it's just a shiny thing in a window, but it doesn't mean anything. So we really want this to be a model of how we can actually build programs that are actually designed by the people that need them, designed by Indigenous people in a respect, instead of an Ottawa knows best approach, but in a partnership, in a respect for Indigenous people. So that was a really important, big victory for us in the agreement. We also put in the agreement specific language requiring this government to deliver action on the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls inquiry and those calls for justice. We want to see action. It is deeply disappointing that years later there's been no real implementation of those calls for justice. So that's something really important, and that's why we included it. And then finally, we strongly believe that any way the federal government can help in the continued work to assist nations bringing children that have been lost to institutions of justice back home, bringing those children back home is vital, and so any support that can be provided, we expressly put that into the agreement. So those are just some of the pieces I wanted to highlight in the agreement, but I want you to know, we know there's a lot more work that needs to be done. This is still a Liberal government, and we're an opposition party. We're the New Democrats who used our power to get some things done, but we know a lot more needs to be done. And we know that involves making sure we end finally, forever, the situation of boiled water advisories in Indigenous communities. There is no justification in a country as rich as ours that every Indigenous community doesn't have access to clean drinking water. And to do that, it means not just the infrastructure, but also this training, the hiring of workers, making sure Indigenous workers are paid a good salary so that they're able to sustainably continue to deliver clean drinking water. And that's something really important. We know that we need to continue to fight the climate crisis because Indigenous communities are feeling the brunt of it. Whether it's land, air, or water, the Indigenous way of life is directly threatened. So we know that needs to continue. We know so much more work needs to be done around education. We need to make sure we are ensuring that people have access to education and there's no barriers and it's of the highest quality. We also know that not only do the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, calls for justice need to be implemented, but the TRC calls to action. Those are clear First Nation-based solutions that need to be implemented. So that's something really important. It's been far too long, and these can't just collect dust. They need to be implemented. And I want to wrap up on two last points. Indigenous healthcare. It is shameful in this country that Indigenous people do not have access to the same equal healthcare. We saw the horrific example of Joyce Sheshawan and how Joyce was treated with incredible disrespect that cost her life. We need to make sure that access to healthcare for Indigenous people is just, is equitable, and it is something that people can access in a meaningful way. And so we're gonna commit to implementing Joyce's principles, making sure we improve the NHIB system so that it actually works and covers people, and work with you to identify any gaps. And justice for Indigenous people, the justice system clearly continues to discriminate Indigenous people. We heard from Chantal Moore's family today, a powerful voice about the changes that need to happen in our justice system. As a public defender, previously, before getting in politics, I saw firsthand the impact of our justice system and how unfair it is. So that's another major change. So I'll leave you with this last. We continue to be a party that you can count on as allies. I want you to know you should count on me to amplify your voice. You have the solutions. You know what needs to be done. You need a partner. Please count on me as someone who's going to take your message and amplify it and bring it to Ottawa and fight alongside you. You're already doing a lot of the fighting. I just want to be an ally. My team wants to be an ally in supporting that work. And I'll just wrap it up with the last thing. I promised myself that I wasn't going to be like this, but when I used to hear people always talk about their kids, I thought, okay, you know, it's cool. You got a kid that's nice. Now I became a dad, and I always want to talk about my kid. So I'm doing the same thing. We have a daughter. We thought a lot about her name. In the Sikh tradition, the name has a meaning. So my name is pronounced Jug, like hug, and meet, like we meet each other, and it means friend to the world. So my parents had a vision. They thought I would be someone that can connect to people and create friendships across boundaries, across gaps. And so the name has been really important for me, friend to the world. So for our daughter, we thought, what name should we give her? And so we wanted to sound nice and also have a good meaning. So we chose Anhad. And Anhad means limitless. And we thought, you know, for a young woman, sadly, in this world, women continue to face so many barriers. So we wanted her to have a name that every time she said it, every time she heard her name, she would think limitless. So she heard her name, Anhad, it means limitless. And when she said her name, it means limitless, because we want her to have a limitless future. And then we thought about it. What we want for our kids is what we want for all kids. We want every kid to have a limitless future. It's what we want for all people, and it's what we want for Indigenous people. And sadly, there's been so many barriers and so many challenges that have limited the Indigenous communities from reaching their highest potential, from living their best life. And so I guess in honor of my daughter, this vision of limitless, that's what I want to do for Canada. That's what I want to do in this world, is build a more limitless future. And so count on me as an ally to tear down those barriers, to tear down those limits, and to build that future that we know is possible, one that's limitless, one that's free of barriers, and one where we can live our best lives. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for this and to take the time to come and address the Assembly. So I will now turn the floor over to Chief Miracle. Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you very much, Jagmeet. And in our language, money is a wista, and we want that to be Ugmeet as well, limitless. So thank you very much for attending our assembly. In 2018, there was a national housing needs study across Canada. The Ontario region had 102 out of the 134 First Nations participate in that survey. There was high participation in Quebec and some of the other provinces as well. Not all the provinces participated. I think BC has their own housing authority, so I don't think they participated to a great extent. But that study was supposed to guide the investments in future budgets for housing. And the roll-up of that study was $60 billion for housing. $44 billion was needed for housing and $16 billion for future growth up to 2040. And I recognize there has to be a plan going forward by the year 2030 to address these needs for housing, infrastructure, and water. But the budget 2022 allocated $3 billion over 5 years. The Ontario First Nations need alone. I'm part of the Housing and Infrastructure Committee for both Ontario and AFN. The need in Ontario is $4.4 billion. And so people are going to be on a long waiting list. They may never see housing for their entire life with the pace that it's going. And I realize that there's many financial challenges that the government is facing with the inflation caused largely by the war in Ukraine and climate change and disasters and the like. In the past, when there was a World's Fair, there was a lottery scheme developed for Expo 67. The Winter Games in Alberta, the criminal code was amended to give the provinces exclusive jurisdiction over raising funds through lottery schemes and gambling. So my question is, would you support the development of a national lottery scheme to generate the shortfall in funds for First Nations community? Would you support an initiative like that?
Thank you very much,
and help us get the money to set it up and get the ball rolling here and start making money.
Thank
I think the money, what was the word for money?
The word for money?
Owista.
Owista. Okay, thank you so much. We will never forget that word.
And if I ask you if you've got lots of money, I would say Sawista Gadago.
Thank you, Chief Miracle. Okay, so as I just mentioned, we are taking only 2 speakers at a time, and we do that 2 times. This is the first time, and then the second time. So I'm sorry, but there were 4 chiefs, no one on the Zoom. So, and I'm sorry for the last one. I already closed last chief, and I have already closed the speakers list. So. Microphone number 1, please, and I'm happy you are here because you were there before and I was so sad. To you, microphone number 1.
My name is Michelle Pierre. I am from the Untitled Nation of the interior of BC. Merritt is one of the places that got flooded, and but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I will talk about that another time. But anyway, thank you very much, Jagmeet Singh, for the information that you gave us on what you're doing. This is one of the reasons why I voted for your party. But today, my concern, and I noticed that you didn't mention it today, is regarding the situation that pensioners have. Very, very difficult. I am going through it personally right now. I have been having problems with CRA because back in 2013, apparently I owed money, and they didn't tell me until about 4 years later. And by that time, the penalties and interest had accumulated to the point, where it was really hard for me to handle. When I first initially owed the $700 that, I didn't pay at that time, not realizing that it wasn't paid, I would have been able to afford it, because I was working. And now, several years later, when I'm a pensioner, and with the accumulation of penalty fees and interest, it has gotten to the point where I found it impossible to pay, mainly because I'm having a hard time just paying for day-to-day living. My rent takes up, my rent and utilities takes up half my check. I am getting about a quarter of what I used to get when I was working, and I would say that by about the middle of the month I have nothing. And so now, the interest and penalty fees totaled about $7,000. I have paid $4,000 of that. Twice I tried to ask them if they would forgive me for the penalty fees and the interest, but I just keep getting the runaround. And finally, in the end, on this last request that I made, I became very angry and impatient, and there was just no dialogue there, no collaboration or anything like that. And now the latest word is that they are going to be garnishing my pension.
Please conclude, Chief.
Pardon?
If you can please conclude or state your question if you have a question.
I am.
Thank you.
I'm just about near the end here. I always seem to get cut off just when I'm just winding down. Anyway, now I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
I don't get up and talk very often. Anyway, I paid $4,000 of it, and now I owe $3,300, and apparently they're going to be garnishing my pension by $3,000 or $330 a month, and which is definitely not going to be enough for me to live on. The amount that I took off for rent and utilities is the first $1,000. The other is food and whatever else I need. And if they take $330 of that, you know, that doesn't really leave me much for anything else. I did go to the office here in Vancouver to ask for their advocation, but they were not able to help me. And so I would like to take that a step further, you know, because I really don't think that I am being treated fairly. And I am not just speaking for myself, you know, I am speaking for other elders who are going through the same thing. I put it out there on social media what was happening, and other elders brought it to my attention that they are having the same problem. So my question is there any way that you can help us?
Thank you, Chief. So I will now turn the floor over to Mr. Jagmeet, and he accepted, so thanks to him, we're gonna after hear the last three, or right now?
Right now, sir.
Right now, okay. So we have a special permission here. The Minuina is getting tired, so so we'll go to microphone. Please, please, 2 minutes, please. I count on you. I trust you. So 2 minutes, and microphone number 2, then 1, then 2. Thank you. You can go. Microphone number 2.
Lease Bahan, Chiefs Co-Water Band, thank you for not cutting me off again. Second time I got cut off today. I just want to echo what Keith Crow was saying earlier, giving elders time and chiefs time to speak, because this is a chiefs assembly, and we traveled. I was just talking to my fellow chief beside me here, and he traveled all the way from Saskatchewan, so I'm really glad he's not going to get cut off on asking his questions. So, Jagmeet Singh, I'd like you to advocate for us here in BC about the healthcare system that's happening throughout British Columbia, because in Merritt we had our hospital shut down again, and it's from the lack of doctors, not from the lack of nurses. So hopefully you can bring this up when you get back into session again, because our healthcare is seems like it's third world now, because, you know, we have to travel further away, either to Kamloops or to Kelowna to get health care now. So I hope you get to advocate for us on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 1, please.
Thank you, thank you. My name is Kevin Jules. I'm from the Cayuga Checklisset on Vancouver Island, and I'm just here to kind of put you on the spot. I actually, you know, the way you ended your speech earlier, I mean, it's true. I look at it the same way. My son is my inspiration. You know, every day I look into his eyes, and I'm in the position I'm in because I want him to be proud of where he comes from, and the future to be bright for him and the future generations. So I'd like to take this time to invite you to our territory of Cayuga Checklisset, and come here or come there and to speak to our youth, to speak on what inspires you and what the position you're in and the things you speak on, because there's a lot of truth to what you speak on, and it's very inspiring. And our youth are our future, and they need that kind of inspiration, and our leadership as well needs that kind of inspiration, because it's just amazing. So I just wanted to thank you for allowing me this time, and yes, I look forward to hopefully having you come to our territory. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring. Microphone number 2, final speaker, Chief, to you. Microphone number 2.
Thank you. My question is just simple. The arrangement, I guess, Mr. Singh, regarding the Liberal government and the NDP. As a chief, I'm not too sure what that arrangement is, and I know through the media, you've been. I think the Prime Minister has referred to it as a partnership, but it's not a coalition. Now, I think it's imperative, that we, to keep this government afloat, because it's really scary, I guess, if things change in Ottawa. We're kind of worried. I think you've heard, our delegation from the Saskatchewan caucus room this morning. So if you can answer that, what assurances do you give, to keep this government afloat? And also, I'd like to congratulate all the chiefs, for staying behind, and marvelous job to the chair. Thank you for staying.
Yes, thank you. Good point, Chief. Thank you very, very much. And I now turn the floor over to Jagmeet, Leader of the NDP. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great job. Okay, thank you very much for the questions. Great questions. First one was about housing, that the needs are so high and there's a massive shortfall if you look at how much money is being allocated for housing and how much is needed. So yes, there's a massive shortfall, and we need to really push. I'm going to continue to push for a lot more funding, a lot more money to build those homes that we know we need in communities across the country. So I agree with that. And the suggestion from the chief was a national lottery as a way to raise money. We've looked at a lot of different ways to raise money. We think there's more than enough money out there if we close some of the offshore tax loopholes. There's companies that are hiding their money offshores. We could end that. There's a lot of companies like Netflix and Amazon that make billions of dollars that don't pay taxes in Canada. We could start making them pay their fair share. So there's lots of ways to start making the super rich actually just start paying their fair share in Canada, and we could raise enough money to be able to pay for these things. So I think we could focus on that first, and then there's lots of other creative solutions, and I'm always open to looking at them. But I think the first one should be making the billionaires start paying their fair share. That would be my first start. And then we'll have all the OISTA that we need. OISTA, is that right? Get the check for all the OISTA. Chief Michelle raised a specific issue, but in fairness, Chief Michelle is right. It's not just her. A lot of pensioners are dealing with a couple of things. You're right to bring up the inflation. I was supposed to mention it in my speech, but yes, the cost of everything going up is hurting people right now. People are struggling, especially if you're on a fixed income and everything goes up and it's more expensive. It just makes it harder and harder to afford the basic things, groceries, putting gas in the car, getting to and from work, getting to and from appointments, just living life, what you need to do. So it's very difficult. And the fact that pensioners are, for a small penalty that was from $700 to $7,000, that's ludicrous. That should never have happened. That is completely wrong. You should never have had to go through that. So I would, maybe someone on my team can follow up with you, and we could find out if there's a way we can help with your specific case to see if they could forgive that amount, because it seems like so unfair that small mistakes resulted in this huge fee that went from $700 to $7,000. That's just wrong. So please follow up. We'll see if we can connect you with someone to help out with that. Yeah. Okay, good. And then the other questions were, yes, healthcare, Chief Coldwater. The healthcare system is in serious, dire need of help. It's across Canada, not just in BC. You mentioned Merritt, but we're having shortages in hospitals, sometimes nurses, sometimes doctors, sometimes both. And it means that emergency rooms are getting shut down. Sometimes the hours are less than they need to be, and people are waiting. There's huge wait times for emergency room, for elective surgeries like knee and hip replacement. We're seeing way too long a wait time. So our healthcare system needs help badly. And one of the immediate fixes we're pushing for is the federal government used to be an equal partner, 50-50 partner, and now they're no longer a 50-50 partner. After decades of cuts, what used to be 50-50 split is now 22% federal, used to be 50%, and 78% province. So it means that a lot of money has been cut. And so we're saying the federal government's got to step up, show leadership, and start properly funding our healthcare system, hiring doctors and nurses with good funds to do that. So yeah, we hear you on that. It's an urgent crisis. Specifically, or generally, there's a crisis for healthcare, and that also specifically hurts Indigenous communities even more. So I hear you on that, and we're working on it. Invitation to speak to the youth and inspire the youth. I think you're a big inspiration already, so I don't know if they need me, but I would be happy to, if I can find it in my schedule. I know my staff is following up with you right now, and we'll try to get out if we can. If we can't get out in person, maybe even a Zoom call or something, but I would love to be able to connect. Thank you for the offer, and thanks for putting me on the spot. It was a good one. Those are good ones, right? Those are good put on the spot. That's not a problem. A nice invitation. And the last one, Chief, I think you asked a question that a lot of people are wondering. We got to speak a little bit earlier, but people want to know, what is this agreement all about? So just to make it clear, it's called the CASA, so it's called the Confidence and Supply Agreement. And the agreement is an agreement that we will not trigger an election as long as the government holds up their end of the bargain, which is to fulfill the things that we negotiated and got. So we're not going to. Our commitment is to not trigger an election unless they, break trust with the agreement. But it doesn't mean a coalition. So we're not in cabinet. Some people called me the Deputy Prime Minister after the agreement was signed. I'm not the Deputy Prime Minister. I remain the leader of the New Democratic Party. We're a separate party. We never actually wanted to be a part of the government. We wanted to remain separate so we could still criticize, we could still vote against things that we don't agree with, and we could still raise concerns. So we're not a part of the government, but what we are is we've agreed to keep the government going as long as it continues to honor the agreement. And the agreement lays out lots of things around healthcare, Indigenous justice, around housing, and a number of other things. So that's what it is. It's not a coalition. It's an agreement to keep the government going as long as they follow their principles. And the reason why I did it is, if we went to an election today, Trudeau's dropping in popularity, I'm rising in popularity, sure, I probably would win more seats. But is that in the interest of Canada to have another election when we just had one less than a year ago? When we're dealing with inflation, when we still have COVID, when we've got a war in the Ukraine, which makes us all feel a little less safe, is it a responsible thing to do to continue to cause another election or threaten an election all the time? And so we thought stability and working together to get people help is more important than being able to win a couple more seats or win a bunch more seats. So that's our focus is on getting people help. When the election time comes, we'll be ready to fight it. But we just thought it would be not a responsible use of resources to now cause another election so quickly after we just had one. Yeah. And another name for the agreement, because I'll tell you a last story and I'll wrap it up here. The agreement, we negotiated a lot of it over Zoom. And maybe you recall sometimes agreements are named after where they happened. So, the Meech Lake Accord, the accord was signed at Meech Lake, or the Charlottetown Accord was signed because it happened in Charlottetown. So we thought the Zoom Accord didn't have the right ring to it. And we all have a lot of horror stories about unmuting and not muting. So we thought Zoom Accord, not a good name. But the agreement actually happened a lot of it, the reason why it happened was we started talking about it right after the election, 2021. It didn't work out. And then June 2nd is my birthday, or January 2nd, sorry. I forgot my own birthday. January 2nd is my birthday, and my wife told me on my birthday, she said, I didn't get you a present, but I'm going to give you a present that's going to be your present for the rest of your life. I said, okay. January 3rd, my daughter is born. So she's my present for life. And after she was born, about a week later, the Prime Minister called. And I thought it was a nice thing of him to do. He called to congratulate me on the birth of my daughter and our daughter. And then the discussion ended up revisiting the agreement. And then we started talking about maybe we'll do the agreement. So in a lot of ways, the agreement happened because of our daughter, Anhad. And her name means limitless. So I call the agreement sometimes on my own. I think of it as the Anhad Accord because it was signed because of her. And her name means limitless. And our vision is to try to build a more limitless future. So that's the other name of the meaning of the agreement. You've been very, very generous with your time. Thank you so much. I've got to head out as well. I know you've all got to head up. Big round of applause to the staff. You do lots of great work. To the incredible MC, National Chief, to all the leaders on stage here. Thank you so much. Round of applause. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Merci. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jagmeet Singh. I hope I pronounce it well this time.
C'est incroyable.
Ah, wow. Il y a toujours de la place à l'amélioration, même à la fin d'une rencontre. Alors, un énorme merci pour votre temps. Vous avez dit qu'on était généreux, puis vous l'êtes. Grâce à vous, on a pu entendre tous les chefs qui voulaient s'adresser à vous. Merci beaucoup.